The Israeli military says that it has more or less restored control over its border with Gaza, but it says that infiltrations by Hamas militants could still be possible. It says the bodies of 1,500 Hamas militants have been found in Israeli territory since they staged their unprecedented attack on Saturday. Now, Israel stepped up its retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza overnight. A spokesperson for the Israeli military advised any Gazan who could to flee. Hamas said that if Israel hit any residential buildings without warning, then it would start executing Israeli hostages and broadcast it on live television. We will have more on that in just a moment, but first, a roundup of events so far.
Israeli tanks gather in fields outside Gaza. 2 days after the violent incursion and terrorist attacks by militant group Hamas, hundreds of thousands of Israeli army reservists have reported for duty.
We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. We are fighting against human animals, and we are acting accordingly.
Hospitals in Gaza are already feeling the effects of the blockade and are running out of critical supplies to treat the many injured by the ongoing strikes.
Unfortunately, the amount of medical supplies we need to deal with these injuries is insufficient. There just isn't enough, and some of the medicines are not available in the stores of the Ministry of Health. There's also the threat of running out of fuel and a power outage. Medical operations cannot be performed in emergency departments without fuel or electricity.
Israel says it is targeting facilities and headquarters of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorist groups, but hundreds of civilians are being hit by the missile offensive across Gaza. Israel says the borders with Gaza will stay tightly closed, reinforced by tanks, while soldiers scour southern Israel for Hamas fighters. But the rocket fire continues into Israel, and so does the aerial bombardment of the Gaza Strip. Israel's prime minister says that this is just the beginning.
I know that we all want immediate results. It will take time, but I promise you, dear Israeli citizens, at the end of this campaign, all of our enemies will know that it was a grave mistake to attack Israel. What we will do to our enemies in the coming days will reverberate with them for generations.
Fearing further infiltration by militants, Israel is also deploying troops and tanks along its northern border with Lebanon, shelling the area as they try to push back the threat, with Hezbollah responding in kind. Israel now faces the very real prospect of a multi-front war.
DW's Rebecca Ritters is in southern Israel, close to the border with the Gaza Strip. Rebecca, what is the situation where you are?
Well, we can hear from where we are about 8 kilometres from the Gaza border, and we can hear pretty consistent thuds, the airstrikes going on in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. There was a lull in what we could hear before. It sounded from where we're standing that things had calmed down a little bit, but we're told that they have been consistently bombing, so perhaps other areas in the Gaza Strip that we're not able to hear. There was, a little earlier, there was a smaller than we've been seeing in recent days, but a barrage of rockets that came over here. But it has been slightly calmer in this area where I'm standing, Sarah, this morning. A little earlier, we were reporting from somewhere across the way. We've been asked to move. The IDF moved us on, the Israeli military, that is. But over there, you can see a very intense build-up of hardware and military personnel, big machines, anti-mine tanks, and we're hearing, and we're seeing some rockets. Rockets are coming in from Gaza now. So, you know, these things very much going on. Yeah, would you like to show that? We can try and show you the rocket
and of
fire.
course, Rebecca, if you need to take shelter, please do so.
We will do, yeah.
Yeah, we
Not
see
sure
the,
if you can
the
see with
rockets.
this
We
lighting.
can see them, Rebecca. We can see those rockets
plumes of
streaming through
smoke.
the air. As we've mentioned, you're on the border
interceptions.
there with Gaza. Can you just tell us, because I mean you're quite familiar with this area. You've been reporting there for quite a while. As we see these rockets here streaming through the air, how are people coping with the situation there?
It's very tense. What I will just say is the rockets that you're seeing firing left is actually the Iron Dome, Israel's defense system, firing towards the rockets, and the plumes of smoke are the interceptions that you're seeing. We cannot hear that there's been any landfall, and we won't hear news of that for some time, for a few minutes at least. But people in this area, it's a very tense situation, Sarah, as you can imagine here. And, I've been saying, I have reported down here before, and, the people here are used to conflict. They are used to hearing these rockets. They're used to hearing the sirens. And in other times that I've been down here reporting, when you speak to the locals, they have a sense of that it's almost just a normal part of their lives. You see people riding around on their motorcycles, for example, and even looking over. Last night, even, actually, somebody looked over to me and was kind of like, what do we do? This is life. But I can really say that it feels very different here this time. People are very worried about what's going to happen. There's this impending sense of anticipation to see what Israel's next move is going to be. As I mentioned, we're watching the troop build-ups happen here in the northern part of the border, but that kind of thing is happening all along the border, and it does lend people to believe that there potentially could be a ground offensive. That's certainly something that's been talked about. We've seen it reported in US press that the US government are expecting the Israelis to go in, but that hasn't been confirmed by the US government or by Israel at this stage. The military here obviously not wanting to give any hints about what their next step is going to be, but as you heard in that report you played just before I came on air, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that it is going to be big and it is potentially going to be long. So the residents here, and of course the residents in Gaza on the other side, also preparing and bracing for the worst. And on the other side, they're already seeing some of the worst.
And Rebecca, it is expected that there will be a ground operation in Gaza. We are expecting Israel to move in. There are some indications of that being a possibility. Yesterday, we saw a number of tanks moving behind you. What are you seeing today?
We've seen further build up to that. As I was trying to explain before, we're seeing, yesterday we saw what appeared to be quite a lot of hardware and personnel, and today we are seeing even more in this area alone. I haven't personally been along the border, but from reports, this is happening all across, all along the Gaza border. We have been getting word that all the breach points from the Gaza fence have been sealed, and the area is currently being mined to try and prevent any further Hamas militants from coming through, breaching that border area. But as we see, we fear the worst, that there will be a ground invasion. It certainly looks like they're preparing for a big offensive.
DW's Rebecca Ritters, thank you. And here's a quick look at some other developments. The death toll since Hamas launched its attack on Israel on Saturday is now over 1,600 people, more than 900 of them in Israel, over 700 reported in Gaza. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency says that more than 137,000 Gazans are now taking shelter at UN-run schools. The U.S. says it has begun delivering military equipment and munitions to Israel. And the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza has called for the opening of a safe corridor for medical aid, saying that hospitals are running out of supplies. And joining me here in the studio is DW's Middle East analyst and Israeli colleague, Shani Rosanis. Shani, we're learning more details, basically, about this attack on Saturday. The horror is growing the scale is growing. We're getting a more complete picture.
Indeed. I mean, first of all, the numbers. 1,500 Hamas militants at least, probably more like 2,000 because there are several hundreds also held by Israeli security forces. That's unimaginable. The scale of the failure of the Israeli intelligence is being revealed as these numbers are being confirmed. It's undoubtedly a great shock that everybody in Israel is still experiencing, and the brutality, the horror, the images of now being revealed because now there's finally access to those towns that were not held in Israel control so far. The burned houses, the bodies all over, the damage to I mean, really complete horror shaking up everybody.
Okay, there's so many open questions, but I just want to drill down specifically at the political situation right now and ask you, because there's much talk about a unity government coming together. Is that still now a possibility?
Yes, very much so. This has, as we were speaking now, there came an official announcement that Netanyahu has had a meeting with all of his coalition partners. They all agreed to the need to extend the government, to go for a unity government, to bring in a centrist government that is led by the former military chief of staff, two of them actually, to bring them into the circle of decision-making. And only now we will start seeing Israel's offensive actually getting going because there's more know-how, there's more knowledge, but there's also a better support, I mean, wider support for Netanyahu, as he feels, in order to launch what he claims to be unprecedented attack that will change the face of the region. So we'll yet to be seen what that might mean.
How about the hostage situation? We've heard a number of numbers thrown out there. There are some reports that there are over 100 hostages. Correct. The IDF, we spoke with a spokesperson earlier today. They're using the term dozens.
Correct.
What do we know about negotiations to release them? So what efforts might be underway? Well,
the government is quoting anything between 100 and 150. The IDF confirmed that he has given 50 families the announcement. And they said as long as they did not announce personally to all the families, they won't be giving the final numbers. Officially, the government of Israel says there will be no negotiations, not with Hamas, not via Qatar, not through Egypt, not through anybody else, that the humanitarian need to free those helpless children, elderly, they don't want to be negotiating on that. They want to expose the way they see it, Hamas's horror to the world and immoral acts, basically war crimes. However, the growing pressure from the Israeli public, from the many, many families who are suffering, who are looking for their relatives, wanting answers, wanting certainty. It's not going to be easy for the Israeli government to keep on going in Gaza as if the hostages are not a problematic issue that they need to first solve.
You have been monitoring Israeli media quite closely. You're also Israeli. You're in touch with family and friends back there. If you could just give us a sense of this moment, what it is right now for Israeli society. What's your impression?
There's no way back. People understand it. What happened on October 7th, that Saturday morning, has changed the face of Israel. That the Israel that they're seeing now is never going to be the same. There's, other than the shock and the horror and the sadness, there's a lot of rage slowly surfacing. Israel is at the beginning of a very turbulent time.
We can now go to journalist Hashem Balusha, who's in Gaza, to give us an idea of the situation. Hashem, tell us what it's like where you are, considering this aerial bombardment and the intensified blockade by Israel.
Well, it's continuous aerial bombardment, as you mentioned. Hundreds or thousands of airstrikes all the time, different areas in Gaza Strip. There is no stop. I can hear from distance that some artillery shells as well at the eastern border or maybe in the northern area. Some areas were completely destroyed, and especially overnight in the city center of Gaza City, a neighborhood called Rimau. I talked to people who are from there, and they are inspecting their places, and they said tens of buildings were destroyed completely overnight. Gaza is in in a situation that is never experienced before. People don't know what's next or what to do or how to cope with this.
Well, what can they do with the food, water, power, fuel supplies cut off? Where can they go?
Well, this is a question that nobody has an answer, at least within the people. Still, like, if you can hear from the background, there was a strike somewhere, not far from where I'm staying. People don't know if they are waiting for the electricity, which is barely coming to their places, like a couple of hours every 24 hours. Some places that they have no electricity for days. Internet connection is disconnected. Food supply is very limited. Access to many places is very hard. Excuse me. And things are very complicated. People don't have answer. They are questioning and wondering all the time what to do, where to go, how to survive with this. Nobody has answered.
Well, I'm told that thousands are sheltering in UN schools, that many are also trying to cross into Egypt. Can you tell us more about whether or not the Rafah crossing is open? Because according to Israeli military sources, that crossing is being closed again. Okay, it seems we've lost you because of that internet connection, which is a little dodgy at the moment. We'll hopefully try to get back to you later, journalist Hashem Balusha in Gaza. Let's now welcome Major Libby Weiss, a spokesperson for the IDF, the Israeli military, who joins us from Tel Aviv. What is the current situation in southern Israel near the Gaza border?
The situation is a very dynamic one, of course. In the last 4 days, the IDF is operating at this stage really to secure the border, to make sure that Hamas terrorists, first of all, are not continuing to operate within Israeli territory and in the civilian communities not far from the border. And of course, to prevent any other attacks that we have seen continuing since the horrific massacre of this past weekend. So it's a very dynamic situation and very much an active combat zone.
The militant group Hamas has threatened to kill hostages if Israeli airstrikes continue in Gaza without warning. Is it true that you were bombing Gaza without giving notice?
What I can say is this. First and foremost, the single most effective way of securing the safety of those hostages is for Hamas to release them immediately, with no conditions, with no discussions, or anything along those lines. The IDF has been striking Hamas sites within the Gaza Strip, of course, to prevent them from continuing the war that they started over the weekend. But the safety and the well-being of these hostages is under Hamas control. They could decide now to release them, to let them cross back into Israel, and that sits with Hamas as the number one thing they can do to ensure their safety.
But at the moment, they're threatening to kill these hostages if these bombings continue without notice. In the past, you alerted citizens before striking. Is it not the case anymore?
Again, the IDF is striking Hamas targets within the Gaza Strip. It is a very complicated operational reality right now. It is an ongoing battle, obviously within Israeli territory, as well. But again, the safety of these hostages sits with Hamas deciding right now to release them, to let them come back home. And that sits, again, that is within Hamas's power to do it immediately.
OK, I understand you can't answer the question fully, but what about the safety of Gazans who are trying to leave the Strip at the moment? I mentioned before the Rafah crossing. Israeli military sources have said that is being closed. There are reports, though, that it is open and people are getting through. There are safety concerns, though. The conditions of the road are also questionable. Can you clarify the situation for us?
Again, it is a very challenging situation. And I have to reinforce the idea that we are in a different paradigm right now. In previous exchanges with Gaza, the reality was a very, very different one. We are targeting Hamas. We are doing everything within our power to make sure that they can no longer keep striking in Israeli territory. Hamas, of course, is the target. There is no other target to what we are doing. But it's a far more complex reality, of course, than what we have seen in the past.
Let's talk then about these hostages. How many people remain captured by Hamas, according to your sources?
What we can confirm are dozens of civilians. We have, of course, a whole variety of men, women, elderly, children, absolutely horrific images that I'm sure everybody at this stage has seen of innocent people dragged from their homes, desecration of human bodies, of human life that we have seen, young people who were at a music festival who were dragged in. So the situation is a national tragedy. It's hard for me to even explain in words the sense of devastation, mourning that everybody feels over seeing innocent life just taken like this into the Gaza Strip. It's horrific, and it leaves us all truly in an ongoing nightmare here in Israel.
Well, Major, if you're unaware of just how many hostages are, how do you plan to bring them back safely?
Again, we are aware of the amount that I can confirm to you at this stage is we're talking here about dozens. Of course, the information that I want to give you is the most accurate and the most vetted. And, there is complexity here in making sure that we are in touch with families and for them to know about the status of their loved ones. So that is the specific information that I can provide to you as of now. And of course, we are doing everything within our power to get as much information about it and to be in open communication with the loved ones who are so concerned about their family members.
Can I just ask you one more question? As far as the Hamas militants who took part in the attack on Saturday, can you tell us how many were killed? We're being told some 1,600, and how many are in Israeli custody? It sounds like a much bigger attack than was being reported yesterday.
Again, it's a very dynamic situation because the battle is really ongoing. But yes, those numbers were released that we were talking about more than 1,000 Hamas terrorists who we killed in Israeli territory as they were attacking Israelis. And again, the situation is a dynamic one, so those numbers are subject to change as this battle continues.
Major Libby Wise from the Israeli military, thank you for joining us here on DW News.
Thank you. A
quick look now at some other developments for you. The death toll since Hamas launched its attack on Israel on Saturday is over 1,600 people, 900 of them in Israel, over 700 in Gaza. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency says more than 137,000 Gazans are taking shelter at UN-run schools. And the US says it's begun delivering military equipment and munitions to Israel. Plus, the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza has called for the opening of a safe corridor for medical aid, saying hospitals are running out of supplies.